This is a program about information. More information than you have ever imagined. A lot of it is about you. Some of it is about your neighbors. How well do you know your neighbors, really? What about the people you work with? Do you know enough about them to trust them? What about the government? Do you trust the government to leave you alone if you abide by the law? Whether you realize it or not, in the digital age, there is much about your life that is beyond your ability to control, right down to your identity. Does any of this make you nervous? Or does it make you feel more secure? It kind of depends, doesn't it, on how they use the information about you. We'll tell you this much. If they want to find you, increasingly, there is no place to hide. One of the least understood consequences of the 9/11 tragedy has been the government effort to harness technology in the name of security. There's been a lot of debate about the Patriot Act and how it has broadened the government's powers of surveillance. But if the Patriot Act were to disappear tomorrow, we would still have to live with new technology that reaches deeper into our lives than most of us realize. There is a growing security industrial complex. There is a partnership between government and private industry operating in the name of security that has gone almost unnoticed until now. It is getting harder and harder to get lost in the crowd. This is what's coming. If we wanted to find you, we could give your picture to a computer and hunt you down in seconds. Today, one single piece of data, your phone number, your address, or your date of birth can unlock your whole life story. And let's face it, in a world that is clearly more dangerous, where we interact so often with strangers, knowing for certain who you are dealing with has become the key to security. How do we protect ourselves and the country against those who wish to do us harm? One of the newest tools to identify yourself and others is called biometrics, an identity verification system that uses your physical characteristics. Dr. Joseph Attic is a pioneer in biometrics.
Identity management has become a big business. If you go back 10 years ago, at this particular show, it used to be 3 tables outside a room.
Really? It is through biometrics that we can prove that we are who we say we are.
With biometrics, you're able to create that missing link that ultimately ties in your credentials with your traits and with your data trail into what truly belongs to you, and that cannot be appropriated or misappropriated by somebody else.
At this technology trade show, we saw iris scans and palm scans, eye tracking devices, blood vessel biometrics that analyze the pattern of the vessels beneath your skin.
Let's do a capture. That's good.
This is a wireless device that the police could use at a random checkpoint. It takes your fingerprints and has software in it to do facial recognition within seconds. Is this actually going to tell me who I am?
It's going to tell us if you have a record or not. So we'll wait and see.
There are many ways to use biometrics. Ever since the earliest days of fingerprinting in the 1800s, knowing more about a person's physical characteristics was important to law and order. In the age of international terrorism, it is no wonder that biometrics is now a billion-dollar business. This stuff gets more sophisticated every day.
It's a capture device that allows us to look at your face in more detail and understand what makes you unique. Who is Peter Jennings?
Right.
What's of interest to your computer are the landmarks, the tip of your nose, the eye sockets. Typically, there are about 80 landmarks of the human face. And then next, it establishes measurements between them. How far your eyes are apart from each other. How far are they relative to the tip of the nose? And that comes up with a mathematical equation that is essentially unique to you. And using that information, technology today is available to allow us to improve our accuracy of determining your identity.
I cannot imagine anything being more decisive than this, am I right?
This is where the future is heading.
In some respects, the future has arrived. Do you have any idea how much they know about you? They, the people who accumulate a mass of information about your everyday life and then mine data from 1,000 sources and sell the information to others.
Hey Michelle, this is Brad down at Nick.
Think about the time that you called to buy a book or a sweater. As soon as your phone number pops up on that computer screen, they can instantly append a complete dossier about who lives at that phone number, who you are, your estimated income, the kind of car you drive. They know the size of your house and the value of the house.
Robert O'Hara reports on the data industry in his new book, No Place to Hide. We have collaborated on this project.
You can study what people are likely to do and what kind of attitudes they have by what they buy, how they're dressed, how you drive and where you go and the kind of car you have. It's very telling. And this is what the data analysts are doing 24 hours a day, and in many cases, they're not even doing it. It's the computer intelligence software that's deriving these conclusions.
And it's not just because of the information age.
Jennifer Barrett works for the Axiom Corporation. They collect and sell information about 96% of American households.
In our list product, we would know your name, your address. We would know something about your family's interests and your lifestyle. You know, what kind of neighborhood do you live in? What kind of activities have you said your family's interested in? Golf, cooking, music, whatever. We help a company understand their customers better.
In other words, it's about marketing. Axiom collects and manages information for credit card companies, many of the major retailers, banks, insurance companies, and the people who want to sell you a car. They use supercomputers to mine for information. Heather McDonald is a fellow at the Manhattan Institute.
And so data mining is an effort to teach computers to do the exact same analysis that a human being would if he could look at 1 million pieces of data in a second. In this aggregation of data, whether it's in the private or public sphere, there's a heck of a lot of benefits. That's why this is happening. It means that we can get credit, we can get mortgages instantaneously. We can get too much credit. We're bombarded with credit card deals. But it has made our lives much, much easier.
This has become a profitable and very competitive business. One of the biggest companies is called ChoicePoint, and Derek Smith is the CEO.
Well, the business premise behind ChoicePoint is the fact that the world's becoming a riskier place to live, work, and do business.
ChoicePoint absorbs information from 40,000 new public records every day.
Since 1997, ChoicePoint's bought more than 50 other companies, and they've got some 20 billion records on virtually every adult in America.
ChoicePoint still does background checks for corporations, but increasingly it works with the nation's intelligence agencies, looking for people who might threaten the country. Smith says that Americans have got to rethink their historic attachment to privacy.
I believe that you have the right to privacy, but not the right to anonymity. And I believe in our free society, as you seek rights and privileges in that society, then we have to know who you are. We need to establish the identity of who you are as an individual, and then for the greater good of society, be able to determine whether or not you should be extended that right or privilege.
This is an attitude that drives privacy advocate Chris Hufnagel crazy.
When Derek Smith says that people don't have a right to anonymity, he's talking about in his business model. His business model is one where everyone is identified, where everyone is fingerprinted. That's not America. The companies that collect your personal information operate in a regulatory system where they don't have to really guarantee you anything. They can take your information and sell it to other people. If law enforcement shows up and they want to know about you, they can hand over your data. They can make inferences about you and make decisions about you.
Many observers worry that private companies are not accountable in the same way that government is, and yet government is increasingly counting on these private companies. In a moment, the man behind the Matrix system. So just to clarify, you basically made available to law enforcement all of the systems which you had devised primarily for commercial use.
I'd say we retooled them for the present threat.
This is Carolyn Lucas.
I'd like a grilled filet biscuit and a senior iced tea.
She lives in Sims, North Carolina, and in some ways her daily life represents what has been lost in the total information age. Yes, there was a time when millions of Americans knew everyone, or almost everyone they dealt with.
Hey. Ready for your Coke? Oh, yeah, I'm ready for my Coke.
Before Walmart and all the other giant stores, people did go to the corner store. Customers knew the store owner, and he knew them.
Here's your boyfriend over there, Mr. Flowers.
Come on, Mr. Flowers. We've got to give you a hug.
There was a system of identification that was based on familiarity.
You're a good-looking man, too.
Right.
Carolyn Lucas knows today that even in her hometown, it's not the same.
Nowadays, sometimes you don't even know your neighbor. You might be living next door to someone who has murdered someone and not even knowing, because of people not interacting with each other anymore.
Today, because of the mobility of our society, that system of identification is broken down. And so we've got to find a different way in which to be able to get that same information, to reinstill in many ways the best of small-town America.
Derek Smith, who runs ChoicePoint, may wax nostalgic, but he clearly sees a business opportunity in the changing way that Americans live. Today, there is a certain irony that Carolyn Lucas works for Derek Smith.
Hello, Sydney. How are you today?
For 30 years, Mrs. Lucas has been an independent collection contractor. She specializes in culling personal details from public records filed on bankruptcies, civil judgments, and liens, much of it dealing with real estate. And she does it the old-fashioned way. She copies down the names and the addresses and the judgment amounts by hand.
I like anything to be on paper. I do not like to punch in something and not have a record of it right there.
And today, her information, so carefully and quickly written out, is soon gobbled up by the ChoicePoint computers.
We continue over time to try to find more specific data, more information, insight about people, so that we're able to clarify and give you a broader picture and insight into people you're doing relationships with.
What I found is that these companies are, in essence, becoming private intelligence operations. They collect information, they analyze it, they find links among people, they look for tendencies, and they do it much faster than traditional intelligence services were ever able to do.
None of these systems do anything more than what a law enforcement investigator would have done in his job 20 or 30 years ago. But what it does do is analyze a great deal more data much quicker.
Hank Asher was the founder of a company called Seisint. He invented a system called Matrix, which was given its name by the government. Multi-state, anti-terrorism, information exchange. Matrix. What can I actually do with the Matrix program?
Matrix does a lot more than just terrorism. Say a child's abducted and you have an address of where the child was abducted from. You have a few clues: green pickup truck, white male, 6 feet tall, 6'2". An investigator can point and click and put that information into it, hit submit, and within a second will come 10 photographs with the most likely guy to have done it, number 1, and so on. So if you had a witness there, they could say it's number 3, that's the guy that took the kid.
Matrix enables law enforcement in Florida, for example, to search through billions of records assembled by Hank Asher's former company, including motor vehicle records from other states that participate in Matrix, and criminal records too. On 9/11/2001, the data industry saw an opening to help the country and profit too. Hank Asher led the way.
I think it was 8 o'clock at night, I started writing a program, and by noon the next day we had a list of 419 people that we felt looked worthy of being looked at. And that's coming out of a database of 450 million people, so we narrowed it down to less than 1 out of a million.
One of the names that Asher's program produced was Marwan al-Shehi. When United Flight 175 was hijacked, he flew it into the second World Trade Center tower. The government was impressed with Asher's program and put up the money to develop Matrix for use by the states. But there was opposition from privacy advocates concerned about intelligence squads in different states getting access to information on people who had committed no crime.
You and I are in these databases. They call them terrorism databases so that you will not object to them. However, what they really are databases of innocent citizens who have done nothing wrong.
Citing privacy issues or the eventual cost of the system, 11 of the original 16 states abandoned Matrix.
Civil libertarian activists declared victory. The interesting thing is that it wasn't victory at all, because the Matrix software is being embraced still by many states and is being seen as a model for this national intelligence sharing system that is starting to grow.
Some system, like the Matrix, seems to be inevitable, privacy advocates notwithstanding.
I know without a shadow of a doubt in my mind that someday every law enforcement agency in this country will run their investigations with this system.
Do you think it does invade our privacy?
Absolutely not. I believe that when people hijack our airplanes and fly them into our buildings where our family works, that invades our privacy.
There are many good reasons to go to Las Vegas. Thousands of people move here permanently every month. Millions of people visit for the fantasy and for the gambling. We have come for a look at the future. Because here in the Bellagio Hotel and Casino, for example, we can experience what it is like to have someone watching us all the time.
Let me interrupt you. Every time I see a black camera here, does that black camera have the capacity to look at us?
Yes.
In this one Las Vegas institution, there are 1,800 surveillance cameras, and from the moment you phone to make a reservation here, the hotel is checking to see if your name is linked to someone who has tried to cheat the system before.
You look close enough?
We've also come to meet this man. Jeff Jonas is a computer scientist who believes that his system for protecting the casino from crooks and con artists will also work to protect the country. The CIA has backed him financially, and IBM has just purchased his company.
Las Vegas is an interesting lab.
Why?
It turns out that opportunists, I mean, it's not like terrorism where there's lives on the line, but in Las Vegas, money's on the line, and opportunists are constantly trying to figure out how to extract, lots of money as fast as possible undetected. And so the ways that they go about doing that are pretty sophisticated. There are people that come into the casino that are using illegal cheating devices. They've got computers rigged to their bodies and batteries taped to their bellies. The casino needs to respond in a way to locate who is carrying out actions against them, who's attacking them, and close that gap between detect and preempt.
Detection and preemption. That is the key to preventing terrorism without putting the whole society under a microscope.
You have a very small number of people that are trying to do the wrong thing. And how do you find them without infringing on everybody else?
The first line of defense is not the cameras. It is the information you gave the hotel to get a reservation. You're in the database now. And even while your bags are on the way upstairs, the computers are going through watch list databases to see if your name is there, or your alias if you're using one. Some people wishing to scam the casinos have dozens of aliases, dozens of identity cards. Jonas designed a program to sift through and track down, to collate and identify the individual behind the multiple aliases an opportunist might have.
This particular guy happens to be a slot cheat.
And he changed his street address.
Right, and we don't want his business.
Yeah. Bad people who are up to no good, they morph their identities and they'll use their middle name instead of their first name. They'll transpose their month and day and their date of birth because they can remember that.
He changed his apartment number by dropping out the 5.
Today, we have a series of casinos that would use this technology, and it finds non-obvious connections. It tells you that the person who you just arrested for cheating lives with the dealer.
Is it a real example you gave me?
Yeah, this is a real example. It's a roulette table, and the scam is called path posting, which means you wait till the ball falls on the number, and then you put your bet on that number.
And the 35.
In this case, the surveillance, suddenly they see somebody continuing to make a bet after the ball falls. So they go down and arrest him, and the dealer says, I can't believe it happened to me. Arrest him, you guys are doing your job, it'll never happen again. And the guy that got caught, on his little arrest report, he gives him his home phone number. Well, Nora beeps in the back room and says, hey, this is the same phone number as your dealer gave on her employment application. So you find a corrupt dealer.
Or, on a national scale, maybe a terrorist, if the system works. That is not Nora, who beeped, by the way. Her name is Marge. NORA is the computer program. It stands for Non-Obvious Relationship Awareness. And in seconds, it crunches through multiple databases to detect non-obvious connections between people. Among those now using Jonas's technology is the super-secret National Security Agency.
What's so effective about Jeff Jonas's NORA program is that it strips away the false veneer that criminals or terrorists put up. His software rips that away and exposes the person underneath. That's why the intelligence agencies are so interested in his software, because they want to use NORA to strip away the phony identities of the terrorists who would do us harm.
What strikes me about the hijackers on 9/11 was how little the country knew about them.
Well, taking a look retrospectively at the 19 hijackers, our government knew about Nawak al-Hamzi and Khalid al-Mihdhar.
This is what Jonas means by non-obvious relationships. Two of the attackers, Nawaif al-Hazmi and Khalid al-Mihdhar, were already on government watch lists.
We knew they were involved in the Cole bombing. And on August 23rd of 2001, the CIA tells the INS and the FBI and the Coast Guard not to let them in. They're bad guys. The problem is they were already here. So now we're looking for them, and on August 25th and 27th, they make plane reservations using their real names.
And al-Mihdhar gave an address also used by Marwan al-Shehi and Muhammad Atta, two of the hijacker pilots.
Muhammad Atta's plane reservation, he uses a phone number which ties you to 5 more.
Nawaif al-Hazmi used the same address as Salam al-Hazmi. And surprisingly, some of them even used the same frequent flyer number.
So it turns out that by knowing just a few, 1 or 2, if you pull the thread, you end up finding 13 of the 19.
Jonas found their names in the newspapers, and they were in the system.
Are you saying that if your NORA, non-obvious relationship awareness, had been in place on a national basis, we might have caught the 9/11 before they happened?
That might be going a little far. It has a lot to do with people and what were the people going to do. I fear that maybe if we knew they were going to get on the plane, we might have surveilled them on the other end, waiting for them to get off the plane to see what meeting they were going to. In fact, they would have never landed. That would have been a bad outcome.
This is all theory, of course. The U.S. does not have anything like this level of sophisticated procedure for sharing information. Having the right information about the right people in the right space of time, this is the greatest challenge for government. When we return, can it be done without harassing the rest of us?
If the government really has reason to think that I'm a threat to aviation security, then I want to know why, and I want a chance to challenge that. If the government doesn't think I'm a risk to aviation security, then I want this harassment that's been going on for 1.5 years now to stop.
Your papers, please. Your papers, please. It usually suggests a checkpoint at a border crossing. In the advanced information age, which is where we are today, every transaction is a checkpoint, where you give up personal information about yourself. Whenever you use your credit card or use an ID to get in somewhere, every time you go through a toll booth using a computerized pass, you are telling other people who you are and where you are and when. And almost any piece of information about us that can be found anywhere in the public record is completely available to private companies who market information about us to others, including, with only some limitations, to the government. Peter Swire was the chief counselor for privacy in the Clinton administration.
The Constitution says that your person and your papers and your homes are safe unless an independent judge says it's okay for the government to go in. Here's how the private sector works. If they can find it from the bank, from the hospital, from your online surfing habits, or from other things, if they have that data, they can use it. And then step 2, they sell it to the government. The government's just a subscriber, and we never saw that coming.
The Supreme Court has ruled that information that a citizen conveys to a third party such as a credit card company or a bank or a hotel, that is no longer in your castle, in your private domain, is not governed by traditional Fourth Amendment rules, because you have already chosen to make that information public by telling somebody else about it.
A recent survey of credit reports, one of the keys to your identity by a public interest group, found that more than half the reports it studied had personal information that was incorrect. The worst experience for any citizen is to lose control of his or her identity.
These are all the names that have been used in connection with my Social Security number. And then there is 65 different addresses and 42 different names.
In April 2000, Nicole M. Robinson of suburban Maryland had her identity stolen by a woman in Texas who worked at a mail-in pharmaceutical company.
My perpetrator had the same first and last name as me, and she looked in her company's databases and found my Social Security number, which was my health plan's member ID number, and used it to open accounts.
Nearly 5 years later, Nicole M. Robinson is still unable to establish definitively who she is, even though the woman in Texas, Nicole A. Robinson, has been arrested.
This is not my date of birth, and they are showing a Texas driver's license number and a spouse's name. And I'm not married.
And if Nicole M. is now somewhere in the government system, for whatever reason, the government may not be able to figure out precisely who she is.
The systems can't determine that we are actually two separate people. So essentially, I am an alias of her, or she is an alias of me.
The government acknowledges that information is often inaccurate.
We have known inaccurate records. There's a big criminal records database called NCIC, and the Justice Department a couple of years ago put out a notice where they said, you should now recognize these records are inaccurate, that they contain inaccuracies and we can't vouch for them. Well, if that's the input, what's the output going to be?
Bad information, badly handled, is a nightmare for private citizens and potentially for the government, which is charged with protecting the citizen. Case in point. David Fati is a lawyer with the American Civil Liberties Union. He's been caught in an information nightmare that leaves him personally frustrated, but also concerned about poor security.
I've had a wide range of experiences when I fly, and I fly quite a bit for my work. Sometimes, and in fact most of the time, I have a completely uneventful experience. Other times I have been led away by armed police. I've been threatened with indefinite detention.
Fati has been told he's on a government no-fly list and detained at airports 10 times in the last year and a half. Fati thinks it may be his name, which is Iranian.
It's unpleasant and stressful and humiliating. And the most frustrating thing about it is that the government won't tell me why I'm on this list, and it won't tell me what I can do to get off.
But Fati is also alarmed that a security system managed by the government in partnership with private airlines doesn't catch him every time.
I'm not a security expert, but it certainly seems to me that if someone's on a list and they're supposed to be stopped, they should be stopped every time. My own experience is some airlines never stop me. Some stop me sometimes, but not others.
Fati did manage to get a letter from the government clearing his name.
But as far as I can tell, that process has made no difference whatsoever, and I still get stopped with about the same frequency as I did before.
In this and other cases, the government cannot seem to get its information straight. But one of the leading officials in the Department of Homeland Security is determined to get more information about everyone who travels.
And using biometrics takes a tool away from the terrorist, which is false documents.
We met Asa Hutchinson, who's responsible for border and transportation security at New York's Kennedy Airport, where new systems have been installed for getting information about foreign travelers entering the United States. While these visitors were in the air, the government had gone through the information in the passenger manifests, matching the data against government watch lists and sifting for suspicious travel patterns. Now, as visitors from foreign countries pass through immigration, their biographical information is checked by swiping their travel documents like a credit card. The government takes the traveler's fingerprints and their photograph is digitally matched against a database.
We verify that it's the same person. Secondly, it is compared with their name, but also their fingerprints against the terrorist watch list. For example, if there was a fingerprint that we got off of a cave in Afghanistan identifying a terrorist activity, that fingerprint is in our system that we can identify that person as a risk to the United States.
Canadians are the only nationals exempt from the system.
We have to have information on people. People don't want to provide information, but it will eliminate a lot of problems when we have date of birth, passport number, address. The more information we have, the less likely someone is going to be confused.
Too often it's the government that's confused, not because it has too little information, but because it cannot manage the information it already has. According to its own analysis, the Department of Homeland Security has failed to merge 12 separate terrorist watch lists currently being used by 9 federal agencies.
Good morning, American citizens, to your right.
And while the government has so far shied away from fingerprinting American citizens on domestic flights, the private sector thinks it has a great idea. A voluntary identity card that Americans could buy to speed their way through electronic security barriers. After a background check, of course, and after they gave their fingerprints and a digital photo. Another marriage of information and technology that seems inevitable. One of the nightmares for people who fear that Americans will lose all their privacy is based on George Orwell's novel 1984, about a society led by Big Brother who ultimately censors everyone's behavior, even their thoughts. 2 years ago, the city of Denver, Colorado was forced to admit that its police intelligence squad had a computer database full of personal details about thousands of ordinary people who were politically active. The police had spent $45,000 on intelligence software purchased from a private company, but very little time or money on how to use it responsibly.
We were all listed as criminal extremists by these documents that came from the Denver Police Department Intelligence Division.
We were not terrorists. We were people simply exercising our First Amendment rights. No, that was it.
In recent years, the federal government has launched more than 100 separate data analysis systems in 52 federal agencies, giving government the ability to know more about its citizens than ever before. There are not many rules about how the government can use private sector data in these systems. One of the systems created by the Defense Department so alarmed members of Congress that they ultimately refused to fund it. It was called Total Information Awareness.
The key to fighting terrorism is information. We must be able to detect, classify, identify, and track potential foreign terrorists in a world of noise.
It was an ambitious research project looking for ways to predict future attacks by sifting for signs of terrorist activity in oceans of data all over the world.
It allowed teams consisting of humans and machines thinking together to work faster and smarter on these complex problems.
Its critics believed it was science fiction run amok. Its symbol was an all-seeing eye. Its motto in Latin was knowledge is power.
There was a program that would identify people the way they walked from afar. One of the obscure initiatives would use a stock market or a futures market to try to predict where terrorism attacks would occur.
National security through total information awareness.
And in the end, Congress killed it. They said it wasn't worth it.
Do you think the government is becoming too deeply impressed by the technological capabilities for defending the country?
Actually, I think the government is paralyzed because they're unsure about what it is they can do with technology. Ever since the Total Information Awareness Program, which everyone lunged upon because it had elements that were perceived to be invasive to our privacy and civil liberties, I think in government there's a lot of fear about what they can and can't do. And that's preventing them from doing some things they really need to do.
The big problem with the debate we're having is we foreclose possibilities before even seeing what they can do. First of all, let the research community have free rein and figure out, can we have a tool that works so well that it will only pick out terrorists in a crowd? If that's the case, we've got to use it.
How the government could use these tools while also protecting privacy was the subject of a task force led by Zoe Baird of the Markle Foundation.
We have to find a way to know what individuals on our own soil might be doing. So this requires us to develop a domestic intelligence capability, which is a scary phrase to a lot of people. And our government is quite ill-equipped at the moment to do that. There is no approach that's going to be sustainable unless the public trusts it as targeted against terrorists, not against the general population.
What happened in Colorado was that the Denver police program triggered a class action lawsuit challenging the surveillance of over 200 different political groups, including the Quakers and advocates of gun rights.
I knew I wasn't a criminal.
Sister Antonia Anthony, a 75-year-old Franciscan nun, was labeled a criminal extremist in the police database because she belonged to a local group that supports indigenous people in the Mexican state of Chiapas.
It said that it was a group that was interested in the overthrow of the Mexican government. And of course, I was a part of the Chiapas coalition. We were not criminal extremists. We never considered the overthrow of the Mexican government.
Our activities were neither criminal nor extreme.
Vicki and Steve Nash and Carrie Apple had all been under surveillance too.
When we're looking at the files, we see a lot of the records that were made by the Denver Intelligence Squad were then transferred to the Joint Terrorism Task Force. And that's the Joint Terrorism Task Force is an entity that the FBI has created.
Since our files were so inaccurate, there was nothing illegal that we were doing, but we were called criminal extremists. Would that keep us off airplanes? If somebody wanted to get a job sometime as a teacher, would they be denied a job as a teacher?
In the end, the city of Denver agreed to purge the files in the computer system of 3,200 individuals.
Nobody here is aiming to create a surveillance society. But it's hard to deny the fact that that's where we're headed, and that as all this technology converges and as the laws make it easier to collect and analyze information, it's happening in a sense despite our best wishes and our best intentions.
Finally, the first man we talked to for this project, Dr. Joseph Attic.
What do you think we have to worry about?
Certainly abuse of this information and the dehumanization. That's a dangerous world in my mind. And it's kind of futuristic to think that way, but if you think about our definition of identity, we've lost the physical human side of that identity. We got to keep reminding ourselves we're humans, we're not just numbers. We have to treat people with enormous respect and enormous recourse, give them the ability to challenge the systems and not be subjugated by them.
As you can see, these tools that allow others to know so much about us are here to stay. And to safeguard legitimate privacy, enforceable laws are surely needed to protect us from the Orwellian aspects of all this, and also to ensure that the private sector is not simply profiting from the nation's anxiety. But there's also a danger if Congress, in the name of protecting privacy, simply rejects out-of-hand programs designed to enhance national security. And there's one last thing to consider. Already, some programs that were rejected by the Congress have been reborn in pieces, renamed, and then classified secret, beyond public scrutiny. So who's going to watch the watchers? I'm Peter Jennings. Thank you for joining us. Good night.